Welcome back here with Power Lunch here on NDTV Profit, and we warned you that the markets won't do very much because when you say the markets are bracing for the outcome of something as big as Britain's potential exit from the European Union, you can understand the wait and watch that's visible on the charts on the Wall Street indices today. 26,819 on the Sensex, up about 0.2%, and it's been holding there pretty much in the afternoon session. Let's turn our attention to the Model GST Law, the sectoral implications. All this week, in partnership with BMR Associates, we've been evaluating the impact and drawing up a checklist for companies in various sectors. Today, we're very pleased to welcome Himanshu Tewari, partner at BMR Associates, to really understand what the implications of Model GST Law are for India's international trade community. Himanshu, thanks very much for joining us on NDTV Profit. Pleasure to have you here. Top 3 takeaways. And I know that our focus today is on the international trade community. That's why I'm underlining that. What are the top 3 things to do to remember when it comes to the Model GST Law?
Thanks, Manvi, for giving us an opportunity to interact with the audience. We were thinking that the top 3 takeaways is that, one, on a very quantitative basis, the effective rate of tax will go up on imports, which means more working capital will be required to fund some of these international transactions. However, the positive side of it is a lot of these taxes will be now available as a credit, but this working capital requirement will have an impact on businesses. Besides this, GST would mean that the whole way of doing business, some of the frameworks through which we have been thinking of businesses, like manufacturing as an event, that will just fade away. MRP as a tax concept will fade away. High C sales as a concept will fade away. So the business community which has grown up thinking about business in a particular framework, a lot of those frameworks will fade away and new frameworks will have to be created for doing business. And this would mean GST is what GST also is doing, and that is important from an international trade community perspective, that customs and international trade is the language of global trade. And GST is adopting some of those languages, like the classification of goods. There's a global nomenclature that gets used when the goods move across countries. The same nomenclature is what GST is also adopting. GST is also adopting some of the valuation principles from customs. So GST adopting the international trade language will help businesses to integrate better with the global trade of the future. This in itself would mean that the tax function, that the trade function and the business function needs to work together to be able to transition comfortably through this change and then hit the ground running.
Companies certainly have their work cut out for them, because it was when you said that, companies treat manufacturing as an event. Terms like MRP, they're so ingrained in the companies, in the customers, and all of this actually just gets parked to one side, and there's a whole new approach that is required.
Yes.
And I'm sure that many companies will freely admit it's going to be a challenge.
It will be a challenge. People are warming up to it, but they have not yet soaked in as to how dramatic this change could be. Some of those behavioral changes that this GST will bring in the business framework, behavioral changes do not come overnight.
Sure.
Compliances will have to be implemented, say, from 1st of April 2017. But the whole skill set behind those compliances, the behaviors, the choices, a lot of things will change. And GST will get the place on the table.
Right.
In the board meetings.
So today, we're trying to actually draw up a checklist of things that companies who are in the sort of international trade community, and that's a broad term that covers all companies that, sort of have some export-import piece to their activities. So what should they essentially be watching out for when it comes to GST?
There are few. And the Model GST Law only is the 30,000 feet framework that is made available, a lot of things will change as a consequence to this. The Customs Act and the Foreign Trade Policy, the two framework document which governs international trade, will consequently change. Lot of things will be rewritten in terms of the foreign trade policy. What has been the foreign trade policy since 1992 will dramatically alter. Currently, the work has just started on some of those frameworks. Industry needs to watch out for those changes.
Okay.
Customs, people have been, industry and businesses have been used to thinking customs in two critical ways. One is, what are the exemptions available? Last 60 years, every budget and the pre-budget memorandums, whether it is FICCI, CII, all the Chamber of Commerce, will be writing that our industry needs this specific exemptions. That very mindset will change, because GST as a framework does not permit exemptions.
Sure.
And so that behavior of living through exemptions will change. Living without exemptions will be the norm of the future.
Sure.
So manufacturing has been the concept so ingrained. Foreign trade policy, the whole structure of export-oriented unit, manufacturing under bond, drawback of duty claimed on goods manufactured in India.
Right.
All these are, we don't realize how much of manufacturing is in our bloods.
Right.
All that will change.
It's the base, it's the starting point for any concept that's built on it.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
so I think these are the, you know, from what you are saying, and it almost seems that there has to be a strategic rethink within companies. Is that a fair statement to make? And give some practical advice on how to initiate this strategic rethink for companies in the international trade community.
Manu, that's a very fair statement that it is strategic change. This change will continue to impact the business processes, the business numbers, the pricing, the revenue, the cost, the working capital requirements, and ultimately the profit. And if all that is being affected by this change, it is strategic in nature at its core. How people can start adopting to it, the starting point is that you need to lay out the business parameters and see how it interplays with broad level of understanding of GST.
Right.
It is the chemical reaction between the business facts and the framework of law that will bring out new frameworks, new understandings, and help you prioritize what are the top 3 things that you can do now. As we are saying, this is a systemic change. Overall change will happen over a period of next 5-10 years.
Absolutely.
But you need to prioritize what first 3 things that business needs to do now in next 6 months.
Without naming any companies, in your client base, based on the conversations that you're having around the Model GST law, you know, share an example of just an interesting conundrum or scenario that you're discussing with a client.
See,
it's a tough one to do that.
No, so
because, you know, I'm just
is,
trying to think, like, you know, for example, take a company like this. You know, they've woken up and realized with this Model GST law, this is how life changes. Is there some example that comes to mind?
So let me take an example of and this is a hypothetical example of a company that is into manufacturing. It manufactured under customs bonded area, which is the export-oriented unit framework, and it import goods into India, but it also sells in the domestic territory. So there are goods flowing in, moving out, and also flowing into the domestic economy. They manufacture under duty-free, they import duty-free and manufacture under customs bond. If that duty-free structure, except for the basic customs duty, all the other duty components, they have to pay it in cash.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the working capital requirement to fund their inventory increases by 20%.
Right.
That is a dramatic change.
Right.
The whole cost structure will go for a change. Those companies which import and export under drawback, the drawback quantum will reduce.
Right.
So the whole economics of business and the backbone of business, currently the IT infrastructure that is required for a smooth transition to GST means government to government interfaces needs to work,
right.
business to business interfaces needs to work, business to government interfaces needs to work. All this in 6 months is a tough one to challenge, to live through.
And perhaps for the first time, India Inc. may be less prepared than the Indian government is.
For sure, Manvi. This time, government is leading from the front and industry. For valid reasons, industry is catching up. You will find 3 categories of companies. Those who are early takers, they have taken the responsibility of doing some kind of a impact assessment.
Right.
And waiting for further action to be done. Rest are waiting and watching when the finality comes for this legislation from the government side, and there will be late bloomers.
And regardless, I think there's going to be a scramble. Himanshu Tewari, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, focusing on specifically the international trade community and the impact of the Model GST Law. Great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Manvi, for giving us this audience.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take a very quick break, and when